we've got a list up here of who we'll be hearing from today. So yeah, first and foremost, there's me. And then we have Yvonne Field, founder and CEO of the Bailey Initiative. Ed Harlow, District Secretary for the NEU Haringey. Despina Johnson, CEO of Enterprise Enfield and North London Chamber of Commerce and Enterprise. And then Dennis Fernando, who's a climate campaigner at Friends of the Earth, and also with Greener Jobs Alliance. And then we're going to move on to the Q&A with speakers and between audience members as well. So yes, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's really great to see so many of you here. And you just mentioned that at some point we'd like to get a screenshot photo, and I think now might actually be a good opportunity for that. So if anyone doesn't want to be in it, please feel free to change your name and or go off camera. I will give you a bit of time to do that now, just a few seconds, and then Anya's going to take the picture. Okay, hopefully everyone's had a chance to go anonymous if they so wish. So Anya, let me know when I'm good to carry on.
Yeah, that should be fine now. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So my name is Finn, and I'm a white guy in my mid to late 20s. It was my birthday yesterday, so I'm still just feeling out what description feels most right. And I'm wearing a black t-shirt this evening. So I'm a volunteer with the organisation Green New Deal UK, and for just over a year I've been involved in its Haringey hub or local branch called Green New Deal Haringey. And before we hear from Yvonne, our first panellist, I'm going to do a quick setting of the scene. So as folks will be aware, we're facing two simultaneous and interconnected crises: the climate crisis and a crisis in inequality as well. And this was before even before the exacerbating and sort of unevenly distributed effects of a pandemic as well. Could we have the next slide, please? We know that as well as these being national and indeed global problems, that these issues are playing out at a local level in Haringey as well. To look at climate, we've taken some lines from the Council's Climate Change Action Plan, which says that if the issues aren't properly addressed, that by 2050, for example, the borough could be experiencing catastrophic weather events and the displacement of people from their homes. And it gives examples like the intensification of heat waves and surface water flooding in built up areas. And then the final point there at the bottom of the slide is really important because it brings in what we've said about inequality. Haringey's incomes and living standards vary considerably, and I'm sure most of you will be aware of the stark division in those respects between the east and the affluent west of the borough. So it's alarming to read that the impacts of climate change will only exacerbate these inequalities across the borough. I think it's also reasonable to expect that another force very likely to exacerbate these inequalities issues in the borough is the growing rate of unemployment. So we know from recent ONS data not only that Haringey has had the fastest rate of unemployment growth in the country, but that places in the east of the borough like Tottenham have been hit particularly hard. So as of the start of February, it was reported that 45% of the workforce in Tottenham was either unemployed or on furlough, which is staggering. And what's so frustrating is that there's no shortage of work that could be done. And that brings me nicely to the next slide, if I can have that. So how do we try to even begin to tackle all of these issues? Well, we think that one good place to start is with green jobs, which is obviously what we're here to think about and talk about tonight. and I thought it might be a nice quick exercise if people would be up for just typing some examples in the chat that come to mind for them when they hear the phrase green jobs. It would be quite interesting to see what people already have in mind when they hear that phrase. But we're not very long on time, so I'll give just like 15 or 20 seconds for people to put some ideas in the chat. It'd be really interesting to hear what people think. That's some really nice examples in there. I'm glad someone's mentioned care and health jobs as well. That's teased me up quite nicely for the next bit. If I could have that, Ruth. So yeah, we would say that green jobs aren't just about home insulation and renewable energy, although those things are very important. We would argue that they can be any work that provides a decent livelihood whilst supporting a low carbon future, such as key worker jobs like in teaching, health and social care. And as part of the ongoing campaign around green jobs, Green New Deal UK have put together data that estimates around 91,000 of these jobs could be created in London over 2 years, and then that rises to 221,000 over 10 years. And if people want to check out more about this research, there's lots to see through the Green New Deal UK Twitter. One of the core staff, for example, has been on BBC News this morning, I think, and there are pieces published in Guardian and the Mirror today. Jenny, would you be able to post the relevant thread in the chat if you've got it to hand? Thank you. Next slide, please. So just before I hand over to our chair, Patrick, I think it's worth mentioning that while the focus of our campaigning efforts is on green jobs at the moment, this is only part of what we as a campaigning organisation are fighting for in the medium to long term, and that is a Green New Deal in full. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's an ambitious government-led plan to tackle climate breakdown and build a society where all of us can live better lives. And this Green New Deal vision is informed by 5 key principles, which I'm going to summarise very briefly in the next slide. So firstly, an obvious priority is to decarbonise the UK as quickly as possible and build an economy based on 100% clean energy. The second key part is about creating secure jobs, which is obviously the focus of tonight. The third point stresses the need to transform the economy so that it works for people and not just for profit. The fourth is about protecting and restoring natural habitats and wild areas, ensuring that everyone has access to a healthy environment. And last but absolutely not least, it's vital that our Green New Deal vision accounts for the UK's historic and ongoing role as an emitter and in exploiting communities and resources across the world. I'm going to hand over to Patrick now, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Finn. Hi everyone, I'm Patrick. I'm a volunteer with Haringey Green New Deal. We've been with the group about 6 months as well. For a visual description, I'm a white man with black hair, quite a large beard, wearing a green jumper, and I'm sat in a very bright yellow room, which has got some awful lighting in it at the moment. Yeah, thank you for joining us. I will try and speak as little as possible. I want to make sure we hear from our speakers as much as possible. And yeah, if you've got any questions along the way, please do put them into the chat box and we will revisit them at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, who is Yvonne Field, and she is founder and CEO of the Ubellion Initiative based at Wolves Lane in Tottenham. So Yvonne, over to you. What do green jobs mean to you and to your organisation and the people you work with?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you very much in particular to Ruth, who reached out to me a few weeks ago. I'm a black woman. I'm over 50, so I suppose I'm in the older category now. I have black dreadlocks and I'm wearing a grey hoodie, and I'm sitting in my daughter's bedroom in Tottenham. So I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about the context within sort of we're looking at in terms of jobs, particularly focusing on young people. Then I'd like to also talk a bit about Wolves Lane Horticultural Centre, where we're based. And I can see Pamela Harling is here, who's been one of our stalwart volunteers for the past few years. I'm sure there are others here who are connected to Wolves Lane. I'd also like to talk a little bit about Ubele and the work that we do, and particularly the work that we've been doing at Wolves Lane. So just in terms of the wider context, really, and particularly young people, when we're talking about employment, at the moment, it's estimated that there's 500,000 young people who are unemployed. And in fact, that figure is estimated to double once furlough comes to an end. Because as we know, young people have really suffered in terms of economic disparity and unemployment, particularly as we find them in many of the shutdown industries, such as leisure and retail. And when we think about Black and minority ethnic communities and young people, because that's a community that we particularly work with, they are 58% more likely to be unemployed than their white counterparts. These are young people 18 to 24, and 47% more likely to be on 0-hour contracts. I actually also looked at the environmental sector, and I have to confess, I'm from South London. I've been in Tottenham for the past 7 or 8 years. I've not really been involved in environmental issues until I found ourselves as an organisation based at Wolves Lane, which is actually in Wood Green. But when I looked at the environmental sector, I was quite shocked in terms of Black and minority ethnic representation. 97% professionals in the UK environmental space are white, which compares with just over 80% of other professionals. When we think about, what's happening now, I was looking at schemes, particularly that we're looking at attracting Black and minority ethnic young people into the environment. And I found a scheme which is linked to the government's Kickstart programme called Race for Nature Recovery, which actually is suggesting they're going to be employing about 120 young people in some of the national organisations that work around the environment, such as RSPB, Friends of the Earth, etc. And what they're hoping is at the end of these 6-month placements, at least half of the young people will get full-time permanent employment. One of the things that Ubele does is we work at the regional level. So we're the BAME, and I hate the term BAME, Infrastructure Group for London. So we were appointed last February by the GLA, by the Mayor's Office. And so we've been providing support, particularly under the COVID pandemic situation we find ourselves in, to a raft of Black and minority ethnic led organisations in London. And one of the things that we're aware as we're moving out of the COVID pandemic into recovery is that when we talk about the Green New Deal, there's also obviously a Green New Deal for London. And I was on a Zoom call a few weeks ago with the Mayor of London and a number of other organisations that work at the regional level, and listening to the 9 missions that the Mayor of London has actually developed with his team. And the Green New Deal for London's obviously one of the 9 missions, but there are others which kind of resonate with us around building stronger communities, mental health and well-being, New Deal for young people, etc. And those things actually obviously intersect with the work that you're doing and the work that we're doing. The organisation that I represent and founded, Ubele, which is from Swahili, which means the future, was established in 2014. We're an intergenerational organisation. It was set up by elders, but over the years since 2014, we've managed to engage and to work with and to employ a number of younger people. We work with communities and across the country. Actually, we're now very much national, not just regional or local. And our mission is to build sustainable communities through what we're calling community wealth building, which are assets like community spaces, leadership, enterprise, etc. Just a little bit about Wolves Lane, where we're based. It's a 3 or 3.5 acre food growing and community site. It's got significant glass houses. I think it's 8 glass houses that grows food, both for local businesses as well as the local community. And under COVID, we received emergency funding from the lottery. where we employed some apprentices, we increased food production, we cooked foods for local communities, and I know Pamela, I've seen her there on several occasions chopping up courgettes and putting pasta into boxes. For we've actually been delivering about 300 meals a week during this period. One of the other things that we're doing that relates to employment at Wolves Lane is to incubate new ideas and particularly new enterprises. So the enterprises that we're incubating at Wolves Lane at the moment, the two that Ubele is involved in, are called Black Roots, spelled R-O-O-T-Z, because actually when you look at the food growing system, we have a lot of people from Black and minoritized communities who grow food in allotments, but actually we don't have a social enterprise type activity that is led by Black and minority ethnic communities in this country that grows to scale. So Black Roots is an incubation project that we are developing to do that. And alongside that, we've got a three-borough project that we just started called Roots into Food Growing, which is taking the Black Roots model, which is horticultural skills, training and enterprise development, and scaling that up into 3 boroughs. So that's some of the work that we're doing in terms of development of the food system, particularly engaging with Black and minority ethnic communities. There's one last thing about Wolves Lane. We are on the cusp of submitting a substantial proposal to the National Lottery Community Fund for new buildings and staff. And the buildings that we're developing on that site have had a lot of consideration from the architects in terms of their environmental footprint and in terms of the environmental materials that we're using, and also we'll be actually creating jobs for local people to get involved in building those particular spaces. One last thing I wanted to say about again the wider system. We've been involved in a campaigning group called Just Space. Just Space is a coalition of about 100 community groups across London, and we got involved with them back in 2016 when they developed a community-led plan for London, and that was challenging the Mayor's plan for London, which is a 25-year plan. All the developments we see around London aren't just incidental, they are in a document that's long ahead of, that comes out many years before the actual, you see the buildings going up. So we produced a community-led plan for London, and we're just in the process now of developing a community-led recovery plan for London. There are lots of workshops taking place between this week and the 6th of May to create a manifesto, and they'll be looking at areas like green space and biodiversity, transport, decarbonisation and energy. So if you want to get into supporting a community-led recovery plan for London, then please contact Just Space. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Yvonne. Yeah, apologies for getting the location of Wolves Lane incorrect at the beginning. I've been in Tottenham for the last 6 months and barely left the place, so I think I'm obsessed. I will now hand over to Ed Harlow, who is District Secretary for the National Education Union in Haringey. And yeah, just note on time, we are running a couple of minutes over our schedule as the best, I think the best things always do. So yeah, Ed, if you can stick to kind of your max 7 minutes, it'd be much appreciated. But yeah, over to you, Ed.
Hi, as Patrick says, thank you. My name is Ed. I am the District Secretary for the NEU in Haringey. I have been teaching in Haringey for 15 years. I'm a white man with a beard like Patrick. I'm in my early 40s and I have a very colourful wardrobe behind me as I'm in my daughter's bedroom. I want to talk a little bit about 2 aspects of this. One is obviously we are a trade union. It is our job to look after job security for our members, and one of the things that Finn mentioned at the beginning was the increasing insecurity of work, particularly the kind of march and the rise of the gig economy and increasing inequality in terms of job security and everything that goes along with that: housing security, food security, financial security. So from a trade union perspective, we of course want to see green jobs that are secure, that are long term, that protect the rights of workers, and ultimately, create a green economy of engaged workers who are not having to worry about whether the phone will ring to call them into work or not, as so many residents, particularly in east of the borough now, do. As Finn said, the local levels of inequality in Haringey between the east of the borough and the west of the borough are enormous, and that is something that we see every day as teachers in our work, and particularly in my work covering the whole of the borough. That we experience the differences between schools in the east and schools in the west. The other aspect I want to talk about is education. Obviously, as I am a teacher, I think it's fair to say, and it's interesting, Finn's little poll in the chat about what green jobs are. It's fair to say that for a huge number of the children currently in our schools and currently in our education system, the jobs that they end up in, the industries that they end up in, may not have even been dreamt of yet. And so it is important that we obviously prepare children for a rapidly changing world in the best way that we can. Since really the coalition government of 2010, there has been a political obsession with a knowledge-rich curriculum, and that while knowledge is clearly important, this kind of Victorianization of our education system comes with a really heavy price. The obsession with knowledge, because it's easily testable and easily measurable, and this reliance on exams and league tables and competition are really not fit for purpose, and they're not preparing children for the kind of industries, the kind of jobs that we're talking about, and the kind of world that we need to get to if we are to avoid absolute catastrophe, ecological catastrophe. Knowledge is important, but we live in a world where if I don't know something, I can literally ask my phone and it will tell me, as long as I know what to ask it. But what we're doing is we're sidelining the critical thinking skills, we're sidelining the vocational skills, and we're sidelining the ability simply to ask the right questions. And we see this every day in fake news, in the anti-vax movement, in COVID denial, in flat earth theory, and and particularly as we're here, in climate change denial. So it's really important that education plays a part in preparing the next generation for a green economy, for jobs in a green economy, and for a rapidly changing world. Many of the children that we teach will grow up as citizens in a post-automation economy. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that kind of inexorable march of automation and computers taking on many of the jobs that we have taken for granted up until now? And so I think it's for us, the Green New Deal, the jobs aspect of the Green New Deal is really twofold. One is, how do we prepare children for roles in a green economy, and roles that we may not know exist yet? And how do we ensure that workers are properly represented, able to assemble, able to collectivize, and able to secure contracts and secure work, and moving away from this kind of race to the bottom that we've had for a little while now in terms of job security and financial security. Thank you. Was I in time, Patrick?
Yes, perfect. No, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for that, Ed. Really interesting perspective on kind of how education needs to be part of the solution as well for a green jobs economy. So just whilst we're waiting to get the slides back up for our next speaker, Despina, just a reminder, if you've got any questions you'd like to ask to the panelists, to an individual or to any of them, please feel free to put those in the chat box. But yeah, if I will then move on to our next speaker. And Ruth, if you could pop up the slides, thank you very much. So yeah, next speaker is Despina Johnson, who is CEO of Enterprise Enfield and North London Chamber of Commerce and Enterprise, to give us the business and SME perspective on what green jobs could mean for the borough. Over to you, Despina.
Thank you.
We'll give Despina a couple of minutes just to settle in, and yeah, if we could hand over to you, Dennis, quickly, and then we'll jump back to Despina. So yeah, Dennis is our third speaker, who's joining us as a climate campaigner at both Friends of the Earth and the Greener Jobs Alliance, who can give us a perspective on some recent research into greener jobs. And Despina, we'll hand back over to you after Dennis's section.
Thanks very much. My name's Dennis Fernando. I'm a Asian man. I'm wearing a red jumper, and I'm in a bit of a dark room. So I'm just going to speak a bit about the emergency plan on green jobs for young people, which we launched earlier this year to time with the spring budget announcement by Rishi Sunak to make the point around the need for green jobs and green apprenticeships. It was produced together with the People's Postcode Lottery, Teach the Future, NUS and SOS, which is the sustainability wing of the NUS. And it also has a foreword by the TUC. So we were really pleased to have the kind of endorsement of the labour movement and of youth and student movements. Next slide, please. The crux of the report looks, as has been mentioned earlier, the fact that there are 500,000 young people aged between 16 to 24 who are unemployed at the moment, and this could hit 1 million after furlough ends. And young people are one of the groups hit hardest by the economic crisis as a result of the pandemic. Part of the reason for this is because of the disproportionate workforce amongst young people in hospitality and retail. Next slide, please. And what the report does is look at the concept of wage scarring. This is where the economic scarring impact of future wages lost for 1 year's unemployment for an 18 to 20-year-old over the next 20 years is calculated. So the average loss for a young person over the next 20 years, if they are not employed for 1 year between 18 to 20, is somewhere between 42 and £133,000. Please don't get overwhelmed by the amount of figures in this report, in this presentation. They are all in the report. It's just to give you an idea. Next slide, please. And then we calculated that collectively. So this is the amount of money that is being lost if every 16 to 24-year-old stayed unemployed for 1 year over the next 20 years. That's 32 to 39 billion pounds in lost future wages, potentially lost. And for a local authority, that is somewhere between 86 to 105 million pounds in lost wages to the young people in that area. Next slide, please. And then this is that calculated for the whole of London. So you're looking at somewhere between 5.5 and over 7 billion pounds for all of the 16 to 24-year-olds if they all stayed unemployed for 1 year in London over the next 20 years. And in Haringey in particular, that's somewhere between 177 to over 245 million pounds, which will be lost in the Haringey area. Collectively, that's all again in the report if you do want to have a look at it. Next slide, please. And this is the loss to one individual. So somewhere between 62 and 84,000 pounds in lost wages over the next 20 years for an 18 to 21-year-old after 1 year's unemployment in Haringey. Next slide, please. And so we're talking a lot about the metrics of what the scarring looks like, because what we felt was that it gives a real terms figure to the feeling of anxiety, insecurity, an uncertain future, which a lot of young people are feeling as a result of a number of different things that are happening to them, from the A-level algorithm right through to the COVID pandemic. But of course, we want to say that young people are part of the solution and part of the answer to the current crisis and the next one, because tackling the youth unemployment crisis makes a contribution against the climate crisis. And we also know that to any argument that's put forward that we can't afford to do this, they don't only benefit that individual green jobs, also benefit the community. And that's what the next slide is looking at. So just to run through very quickly, cycling and pedestrian infrastructure, if 50% of English and Welsh towns and cities had best practice cycle lanes and pedestrianisation, that could lead to somewhere between 5 and 34 billion pounds in healthcare savings. Waltham Forest has had a mini Holland project, which is looking to do something like this. And a study has shown that their local population would gain 41,000 life years as a result of the scheme. And each typical cycling city could be worth 377 million to the NHS in healthcare cost savings, according to 2011 prices. In terms of domestic retrofitting, we know that that will lower heating bills at a time of rising energy prices, but also warm homes could prevent 3,200 deaths each year that are currently linked to damp, cold homes, and reduce the estimated costs to the NHS. Next slide, please. And here are some of the other co-benefits that come from green jobs. That's flood defences, new social housing construction, plastic recycling infrastructure, and accelerated full fibre broadband rollout. So that idea that green jobs are quite across the spectrum in terms of what the benefits that you get from them and what kind of jobs they are. Next slide, please. And so our key asks in the report, which did grab some headlines in various press, was 250,000 green apprenticeships over the next 5 years, funding green infrastructure to create over 1 million jobs in the next 2 years, creating centres of excellence to plug the skills gap. We have one of the worst in Europe in terms of skills gap and skills training for adults. So we're asking for a 10-year settlement for further education to enable the delivery of apprenticeships and training at a fast rate. And coming back to one of the points that was made earlier, we want to see diversity bursaries go to groups that are historically disadvantaged. So that includes BAME, women and disabled people, amongst others. Next slide, please. I just thought I'd end with a couple of, well, just with this slide, which is to say that despite all the news that you hear about kind of Green Jobs Task Force and various other things, the latest ONS data shows that there's been a decline in the number of people employed in low carbon and renewable energy economy by 30,000 over 2014 to 2019. And that green businesses have also taken a drop. That's from a Guardian sourced article on that ONS data last year. Next slide, please. And this is just to show that green shoots are possible. The mayoral candidate, Andy Burnham, basically at hustings this year to youth climate strikers, he made a pledge to set up what's called a retrofitting task force. And that's looking at the powers he has to look at what the problem is and the deficit of retrofitting in the area. And then to work with social landlords to look at retrofitting and also to look at the really powerful role colleges can play in terms of repurposing the curriculum to be able to create the skills to teach the next generation of the workforce to meet those needs. So that's some of the really exciting work that can be done in localities. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dennis. There was one very specific question. Might not have the answer on your fingertips at the moment, but there was one about EU young workers who left the UK. Are they counted in the numbers within this report? So yeah, maybe if you can, if you've got the answer to that one, feel free to drop that one into the chat. But I will now try and hand back over to Despina. Despina, are you with us?
I am, yeah, sorry, I think I've got a poor connection.
No, as long as you're in the end.
Thank you.
Fantastic, I'll hand over to you now.
Hi, I'm Despina and I'm a white woman with dark hair. I'm in my 50s. I'm wearing a black top with a grey scarf and I'm at home at the moment in my living room with a few kind of disorderly books in the background. I run two companies, the North London Chamber of Commerce and Enterprise Enfield. The Chamber is predominantly for members, so they pay, and we have a mixture of small businesses, corporates, and also not-for-profit and public sector organisations. Enterprise Enfield is a different organisation altogether. It's a social enterprise, and it was created to help people start and grow businesses, starting off in Enfield, but now we do have contracts that cover North London. We do have an aim to help people for free or heavily subsidised, and we've been running for about 30 years. Next slide, please. What I wanted to mention before I talk anything about green jobs was just a little bit about small and medium-sized businesses. They're designated as having less than 250 staff and have been struggling through the pandemic, and the impacts are being felt at the moment and will continue to be felt. And I think when you mention the furlough figures, that reflects very much in businesses struggling at the moment, but not wanting to lose their skilled staff in the meantime. SMEs account for 99.9% of the business population, so they're really, really significant, and 60% of employment in the UK. And I think what we don't want to do is have a problem with them recovering and not being able to be productive and sustainable going into the future. With the Chamber and our sister organisation, Enterprise Enfield, we're focusing very much now on SME recovery. And we're doing that by providing business advice and business skills training to help SMEs adapt to these new circumstances. Next slide, please. As with all challenges, there are opportunities. And what we found is that one thing that all businesses have had to embrace at some level is digital transformation. And for a lot of businesses, it means that they're able to continue their services by having staff working remotely. They're not necessarily working from their offices, and they're starting to look at digital technology and online tools. And these can help them with their sales, marketing, customer management, customer relationship management, and bookkeeping. So digital tools such as Salesforce and Xero accounting. And they're obviously having to upskill at a rapid pace, and their staff as well. But I think as things are progressing, I think everyone's aware, and SMEs are aware, that there is increasing efficiency, productivity, and cost reduction in this approach. And it also has an ongoing or another impact of reducing their carbon footprints, because they're not in the office as much, they're not using the resources, they're not printing, and also their staff can work remotely, can work flexibly, and reduction in travel, and also not just travel to and from work, but also travel to meet clients and partners. We're very much encouraging SMEs to invest in upskilling their teams, because that is so important for the future for them and for their staff. And I think when we're talking about green jobs and unemployment, the most important thing is investing in skills for people, and particularly digital skills. And overall, there's greater climate awareness, and we promote the Carbon Trust SME Carbon Footprint Calculator to help businesses start to track their own carbon footprint and really understand how they're using energy and where there's room to make improvements. Next slide, please. For businesses, there are growth opportunities, and in particular, there's growth opportunities in the green and digital sectors. And just to give you a summary of SMEs in the green economy, they can be in renewable energy, construction, and that includes retrofitting, transport, waste management, and clean tech. There's also roles in self-employment, and there's roles such as commercial energy assessors and consultancy services, usually for other businesses. And what I've done at the end is just given examples of business in the North London green economy. These are clients we've actually worked with and supported in the past. And just to give you a kind of an idea of the types of businesses and the roles that they have. So Achilles Energy Assessor is obviously an energy assessor who's based in Crouch End, and they have a whole range of services that they offer to residential and commercial. And it also includes the EPC certificate. So that's the energy performance certificate you need for homes and particularly for commercial premises. Ecological Energy is an eco homes organisation and obviously construction company as well. And I think I've got the names down here somewhere. Yeah. So they have jobs as cavity insulation installers, solar panel installers, I've got 40 Hall Vineyard, who are a social enterprise and have a vineyard in Enfield. They offer volunteering opportunities to help them with harvests, but also with sales. And obviously volunteering is another opportunity in the green sector, which is useful for developing confidence and skills. Pure Fuels is an organisation that's run from Edmonton, and that organisation takes cooking oil from commercial premises and then processes it into biodiesel. And the kind of jobs that they have there are technicians, engineers, and also drivers to collect the oil and distribute the diesel at the end. Retrofit Works is a membership organisation that works with different sectors. It can work with residential, commercial, or public sector, and it matches them with their network of suppliers to help people to retrofit their buildings, but adding a lot of advice and guidance about what needs to be done and how to access grants. And then we have North London Construction, who again do eco homes. They specialise in areas such as hemp blocks, which is really unusual, and also recycled plastic for roof tiles. I think there's a kind of general, although they have specialist jobs within these organisations, back office, there's an awful lot of normal kind of generic roles that go on. So you have sales, marketing, accounts, administration, project managers and managers. So it's a whole raft of technical roles plus the normal roles you would expect in an office. Okay, thank you. I've got my contact details at the end. Just generally, as an organisation, we do offer quite a lot of free support to businesses in North London. We do business advice. We run startup webinars, which are all free. That's the business hub we have there. We are offering a correspondence address and business advice for at £20 a month. So it's really, really low cost for people who want to start businesses. And we also run a lot of programs for women. So women that are thinking of starting a business and women that want to grow businesses as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Despina. And thank you again to all of our speakers there. I think it's great to see some really different perspectives on the kind of green jobs agenda, but each bring quite a unique perspective, but some very consistent messages in there. I think maybe coming from more the points Yvonne and Despina were pointing out, it's great to see some of kind of some of the initiatives in the space that are already happening and being led, and particularly in terms of kind of the social entrepreneurship and the SME side of things and how things are getting off the ground. But I suppose on the flip side of that, some of the stats we saw in the report from Dennis are quite startling, and the points raised by Ed in terms of some parts of the education system not being set up and not helping young people to be set up to enter the green jobs economy are concerning. The chat and the questions are becoming quite active now, and obviously we're scheduled to finish at 8:15, so we will try to wrap up by then, just so our speakers who have been with us for a while can get off and enjoy their evening. So I will try and get through as much as possible. One question that seems to be coming up and is quite a consistent theme, and I think it's probably worth us facing into to begin with. Obviously, from the Green New Deal UK perspective, we are an organisation that wants a government-led, funded approach to creating green jobs. And what we've seen in the case of, I think Yvonne, you mentioned it in terms of the Mayor of London, that, there is a Green New Deal initiative there. We see some space in terms of what local boroughs or local councils can do, and we know there's a role that central government have to play in terms of things like the Kickstart scheme that again Yvonne mentioned earlier, and as well as educational policy, things like that. So I think the question I'd like to put out to all of the panelists is, in terms of where do they think we are lacking action, and what action needs to be done by these different levels of policymakers, whether that's very local, borough council, Mayor of London, or national government, and where do you want to see them tackling this urgently, and what activities would you like them to focus on? quite a lot in that question there, so I'll give you a couple more seconds to think that over. I don't know if I have a volunteer from the speakers to answer that first. Despina, I can see your hand going up. Sorry.
Just this is obviously from a business perspective. I mean, for many years, what we've realised is that when there's public sector contracts, they are not broken down into small enough packages to go out to smaller businesses. If there was more work for smaller businesses, they're more likely to recruit locally, and also there can be more control over how they recruit as well. When projects are massive and they go to very large companies, there's not much real control over how the employment works with that. And I think there is a good track record of SMEs employing locally and employing from different ethnic minority groups. And also there can be more, I suppose, it's support to employ young people. And I think it's an opportunity that's missed, and it would help obviously with SME recovery as well. So that's just a thought from my side.
Great, thank you. And Ed, I can see your hand up as well. I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, Despina makes a really good point, and clearly, big companies have a massive advantage in terms of economies of scale and access to the way in which these government contracts are structured. But invariably, the terms and conditions and job security in huge companies can be variable, because part of the economies of scale model that they use to be profitable is through driving down wages, driving down standards, driving down job security, and this is why we've seen such a kind of proliferation of gig economy jobs, bogus self-employment, and those kind of things. So those kind of things are far easier to organise against and to work with smaller employers on decent terms and conditions, employing local, cutting down on travel, and all of those things that Despina mentioned. Thanks.
Great. Yvonne, I can see your hand go up next. Pass on to you.
Yeah, just to pick up on some of the points that I made earlier in relation to your question. So, one of the things that we're really concerned about in terms of, sort of skills development and the creation of a new generation of artisans, particularly within the green economy, is that, we have a lot of older people within Black and minority ethnic communities who are very skilled, whether it's around sort of, some of the traditional crafts, or whether it's around food and horticulture, but actually they're not able to pass those skills on to younger people. So there needs to be, a raft of training programs. I know it's been mentioned before, but not just in FE, but actually in other settings as well, where there can be some opportunities for skills sharing and skills development, which might lead to new jobs. I think there's also need for education, because Black and minority ethnic communities may not hear about the new sectors that, there's a large number of our young people in the gig economy, and we know that's fallen by the wayside. Just hearing about sort of social enterprises or self-employment, which might not have much behind it in terms of sustainability. I'm thinking about how can we also encourage young people to get involved in community-based enterprises like cooperatives and community enterprise and so on, that actually means that you work in groups and build things more sustainable. There are a number of sort of networks and movements that are kind of emerging, such as Wretched of the Earth, Land in Our Name. These are networks that have been led by young people of colour, but I think we need many more of those and those kinds of networks and initiatives to be supported, so that we can sort of build sort of more diverse movements and involvement in the sector.
Great, thank you for those points. And yeah, Dennis, maybe hand that over to you.
Yeah, just a few things. I mean, I think the main thing is that I'll just start with an anecdote. A number of people, when we were producing this report, talked about getting heat pump boilers fixed in work, like members of staff. And they were talking about how the heat pump installers are quite small outfits that are absolutely overrun with the demand. Because as the government keeps setting new targets for low emission vehicles or for phasing out gas boilers or whatever it is, that has to be worked backwards. You've got to put in place the skills necessary to create a an alternative to that, and that isn't at the moment happening. So there's this great headline, this great intention, all designed to try and stop climate change, but it hasn't been worked through and worked backwards. And you only need to look at the recent Greener Homes Grant fiasco, where the ability to fit your home with, you know, to create a warmer home in a more lower carbon home was just a complete washout and a complete mess. So I think that working those targets backwards and working with local people in those localities to make sure that that happens is really important. But also the green apprenticeships is a really great step towards that, because it builds in business because it's wage subsidized, and it builds in a job for young people, and it starts to look at a green workforce. So a number of things that they do need to work on, I think.
Great. And yeah, I think one of the points that's been quite consistent as well that has come up for all of this is all about it's not necessarily just the need to create jobs in the green space. However broadly we define that, it's about equipping people with the skills. And I think it was a really interesting question that came up about how do we ensure that let me make sure I phrase this right, about make sure that maybe older people are still have access. We do know that as it stands, the younger people are being hardest hit by the COVID related employment crisis, and often they're in precarious roles. But what we do need to know, we do need to make sure is that any green recovery is inclusive of everybody, and yet sort of age and lifelong learning is important to that. So yeah, just good to hear your perspective of, what could we do to make sure that we are helping those young people who haven't even been able to make it into the green economy now, but also making sure that we don't lose the skills of older people, and how helping them translate maybe their experience into a new green economy. I don't know if anyone would like to volunteer first for that question. Ed, over to you.
Yeah, I think I said in the chat, I think Nick made a really excellent point about lifelong learning and retraining. And as I said, we are trying to prepare children for an economy that we don't know exactly what it will look like in a rapidly changing world. And of course, the ability to retrain. I think that the days of starting work at 16 or 17 and having one job and one career until you retire are pretty much gone. And so people will move around, and I think there are huge advantages to properly funded lifelong learning. And as Yvonne said previously, it works both ways as well. So there's a huge amount of experience to be gained from older generations, and it's about fostering the links to share the skills and experience. And there have been real efforts over the years to get career converters into teaching later in life. So people with real world experience of working in other jobs, and rather than people who just university to teacher training and then into school. And there are massive advantages to those people coming in and sharing life experiences. Teaching has become a very, very difficult job over the last decade, and the funding issues with education in this country are well documented. So it has become more challenging. But I think certainly we do need to think about well-funded, free access to lifelong learning for all, and for consistently being able to upskill, which is not a particularly nice word, but is very, very important in everything that we're talking about, so that we can't afford to abandon older generations while we're ensuring that we prepare children. There needs to be equal, easy access for everybody.
Great. Despina, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just think there's a bit of an opportunity with young people that I think that I know a lot of young people are disillusioned about the future, and obviously this pandemic hasn't helped. But I think a lot of them are motivated by the thought of climate change and working towards it. So I think it's about really kind of gathering that passion, but then showing them how they can work. Not just everyone wants. It's very hard if you do everything on your own. But if you actually can make a change through your work and through your career, I think it's a wonderful way to express yourself and to build your career, and hopefully, obviously, in a good job. But I think if they have that passion, then it's our role to show them where those jobs are and what those career paths are like, and break it down, because otherwise it's a little bit obscure. The green economy, what does that mean to a young person? So breaking it down to real jobs, and maybe actually having people who run interesting and exciting companies come and talk, even online, and just answer questions about their business, their path, how they got there, what motivates them to do that work, and just make it a little bit more personal and also something that a young person can actually get excited about, and then have the motivation to upskill and I suppose there could be some kind of qualifications that are required, but it's different when it's part of your career path. It's not such a kind of a distant, objective.
Great, thank you for that. I suppose one other question, maybe thinking more on a practical level. We've talked maybe a lot about entrepreneurship and opportunities. If there's anybody here that, in terms of the audience today, that wants to get directly involved, whether that's, involved with local initiatives, setting up their own business, or trying to, create, more opportunities in the space. I mean, do you have any advice to them in terms of where they could look to next, or how they can get involved? I think maybe Yvonne and Despina might be kind of more on your side of things, but yeah, it'd be good to know kind of any practical advice. Yvonne?
Every borough, and certainly Haringey, has a local CVS, Community and Voluntary Services infrastructure group. So this in Haringey, it's called Bridge Renewal Trust, and it's located next to the Chestnut Centre in Tottenham. So they're there to provide support to individuals and groups, or certainly people who want to set up groups. They can help with advice on structuring it and funding and kinds of things that you might do, registration, all of that. But also they hold a database of local initiatives that are run by the not-for-profit sector, whether it's charities or social enterprises, and other voluntary groups. So that's a good place to start when you're looking for what's going on in Haringey that you might want to be connected to. I mean, I'm always, whenever I go out and about, and I've done this forever because I've been involved in community development for over 40 years, I always find places, whether it's cafes or libraries or community spaces, and just pick up loads of leaflets. But when I go home, I then find, look at what I've picked up, and I'm sure I'll find something of interest there that I can follow up. Also, just getting onto mailing lists, for things. I mean, Wolves Lane, we produce a monthly newsletter about what's happening there. Ubele, we also produce a weekly bulletin, and we have a whole raft of information in there, plus a monthly newsletter. The bulletin was developed during COVID in response to that, and we have lots of information about what's happening, funding opportunities, really interesting initiatives, and so on. So those are ways in which you can certainly connect on the social and community side, and there are many other suggestions that I haven't mentioned at the moment.
Yeah, do you want me to add from the kind of enterprise side? I think as an enterprise agency, we would see businesses in the green economy as businesses. So it's very much about the usual approach to looking at where they sit in the marketplace, what exactly they're going to be doing, how they're going to have a business model that works. So it's basically the business planning, business skills, but we would get a business advisor involved that is an expert in the green economy to make sure that they're able to make the links and do the research in the best way that they can. And as I said, we do have just kind of free access support. So if anyone's interested in starting a business or a green business, they can just look at our website and you know, go along, either have some business advice or go along to a startup webinar.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for that. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, and I'm very aware we're getting very close to time, and the time has absolutely flown by. It's been fascinating to hear all of you speak and hear all your different perspectives. I feel like this is a topic we could talk about for hours on end, but I do recognise you have kindly given your time, and it's a yeah, it's also getting to evening time, and I suppose many of us might not have had dinner yet. But I suppose I would just like to round off, maybe just a comment from each of you in terms of what do you think is the absolute biggest priority for this, you know, this for green jobs, and what you would like the audience to do, you know, go away as an action for us each to take away to kind of support your perspective on how do we yeah, get this green jobs agenda front and foremost of everybody's mind, and not least the policymakers in Westminster and town halls and City Hall. So yeah, that would be the kind of the final question. What kind of action would you like us all to take away to boost the green jobs agenda? Yvonne, thank you. Jumping up first.
Yeah, I'd like everyone to go away and have a conversation with somebody they wouldn't normally have a conversation with. So step a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and to actually talk about what do green jobs mean, what are the kinds of green jobs available. Ask people if they actually, you know, whether it's a young person, older person, have they actually thought about the sector? What you know, I mean, just begin to demystify, I think, because it is a very broad field and has so much diversity within it. And I think sometimes people can sort of be a bit resistant to thinking about the economy, the green economy or green jobs, because it feels like it's a certain group of people that are only interested. So I think there's something about trying to catalyse a conversation with people you wouldn't normally talk to about this issue.
Great, thank you for that. Who would like to jump in next? Dennis? Oh, Dennis, sorry, hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'd say that we are in the middle of a situation where the words build back better keep being used, but actually we can only build back better if we build back greener. So we have an opportunity here to ensure that we are both solving the current crisis and as best as we can insulating ourselves against the crisis we know that's coming. That will be worse because you can't lock down against climate change. You know, you can't do the kind of things we're doing at the moment. And once it's run away, right? And so I'd say in terms of the Green Jobs Report, there's some very specific stats around Haringey in particular, which help with the conversation. But also, if you are bitten and passionate about climate change or you know, economic recovery or, you know, job creation, this report is an opportunity for you to say what you want to say to a decision maker, whether it's a politician, a council leader, vice chancellor of a university, and say, here's what I want, and here's the report that you need to read to understand the case. And that's a direct quote from a young activist who said that's what the report has done for them. So I'd just say that we try to create a movement-ready document that's meeting people where they're able to advocate for what they want.
Great, thank you, Dennis. And Ed or Despina, if you'd like a final comment. Ed, saw your hand go.
Yeah, I just expand a little bit on what Dennis said, and I think, you know, he's right that, you know, in many ways the pandemic has shown us some of the things that are possible, and it has provided us with an opportunity now to, you know, to build back greener, as he says. And just on you know, what Yvonne said about going and talking to people about this. And again, as a teacher, I would ask, you know, go and talk to kids, go and talk to teenagers about their hopes and fears for the future in terms of what kind of jobs they think might be available, what kind of world they think they might be living in 15 years. and think about those conversations, because we've seen with the school strikes in the past, we've seen with young activists how passionate they can be, but also how much sense they can talk a lot of the time, and it's vital that they feel involved and listened to, so that we can carry them along with us. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ed. And Despina, final comment?
Yeah, I go back to my previous point. I think generally jobs are dependent on businesses being there, and particularly SMEs. So it's about those contracts getting out to local businesses. And I think for people just to support them, the local. I mean, everyone says support your local business, support your local green business. Just show them that that there's a lot of I suppose enthusiasm for what they're doing, and it just all helps to build that feeling.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all of your input. It's been a fascinating chat. And I would love to give a big virtual applause, clap, whatever we'd like to do, and to thank our speakers. Sorry we didn't get through all of the questions. What we'll do is we will try and pass on anything over to the speakers, see if they can answer them and have a look at them, and we can kind of share that out after the event as well. But I will hand over to Finn and Anya just to wrap up for us.
Hi, yeah, thanks everyone. So yeah, we've obviously come to the end of this fantastic session. It's been really interesting seeing such a variety of voices and opinions and thoughts. There's lots of thought to take away. Yeah, so just to round up, on the screen you'll see we've got a feedback form. I think the link's going to get put in the chat, and it'd be great if you could feedback any comments and thoughts. It'd be really useful, because we're hoping to do more events in the future and really want to tailor it to what our audience want. We'll also send these round after, so if you don't get the links in the chat right now, then we'll send it after. In the chat and on the screen you can also see our website and social media handles. Do follow them, and also follow all our speakers. They're all on social media as well, and all the groups that they've spoken about. Yeah, so finally just want to say a massive thank you to all our speakers, and to the audience, everyone who's come today. It's been really wonderful spending the evening with you. And yeah, and if you do want to kind of get more involved, do send us an email, and we can speak to you about how to get more involved in our group, or just keep you up to date with things we've got on. So I'm going to end tonight there, and I hope that everyone goes and has a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.